was excited about being part of my Uncle Fong's veterinarian career and his love for animals. This shaped my own love and special relationship that I have with animals as well. I remember the summers I spent with him helping in his veterinarian practice. I still remember when he first started out and was a veterinarian for large animals. As you can imagine, going to the farm to see and treat pigs and cows were a thrill for a young boy. And I was able to see the compassion that he had in helping these animals. It was at that time that I wanted to be just like him, and I wanted to be a veterinarian. Although life goals change with time, and I didn't become a veterinarian, the compassion that he had for animals, his life, and the love he shared with everyone greatly influenced my career choice to be a child psychologist helping children with disabilities and victims of child abuse and neglect. I will miss my Uncle Fong very much. I will miss his smile, his compassion for others, his love for animals, and yes, his baby Hugh stories. I, however, know that he will always be with me and with all of us. With each story I tell, with each time I spend sharing my love for my animals with my grandson, and for each child that I help, there will be a part of my Uncle Fong that will be with me. Uncle Fong, thank you for all that you are and all that you did. You will be alive in our hearts forever.
David?
So you have heard my brother Doug's eulogy about Dad and Stephen's words about his life, his accomplishments, his relationships with others, and all the lives he touched, about how laid back, jovial, caring, and loving he was. I'd like to give you another view of Dad, the view from a child's point, from a child very young to a child grown up, namely myself. I can remember before Dad had his practice at the Kapalama shopping center called Kapalama Pet Clinic, and then later when he moved down the street and his business became Kapalama Pet Hospital, where it still is today, how he interacted with his patients, the animals, and their owners, how he seemed to know all the patients' first names and could not only make them feel at ease, but also their owners. How he would say a few words in the owner's language to make them laugh. I had no idea what he was saying, but it seemed funny to the owners as they seemed to feel more at ease. Dad was also an entertainer. As my brother Doug mentioned, he went to schools to talk about veterinary medicine. I remember being in the first or second grade when my teacher asked volunteers to ask their fathers to come to class to do a show and tell presentation on what they do for a living. I volunteered Dad in front of the class, not knowing if he would come or not. That night, when I went home and asked him, he just replied, "Sure, no problem. When do you want me to come?" That was Dad. On the day of the presentation, Dad came to class dressed in his scrubs with a stethoscope around his neck, carrying his black doctor's bag, and carrying another huge black bag that I had no idea what it was. He brought live samples in bottles of organs and heartworms and huge live ticks. You could hear the oohs and ahs from the class. All eyes were focused forward on Dad. He brought out different size syringes that he claimed to give his patients their injections, starting from small size ones for small animals to bigger ones for bigger animals. When one of my classmates asked, "How do you give a shot to an elephant?" my dad then brought out the huge black bag and the biggest syringe that I'd ever seen. It had to be close to 2 feet long and a good 6 inches in circumference. My class laughed. remember being the talk of my school for the next week. That was Dad. Recently, a stranger in an elevator who was staring at me for a while asked me if I was David Choy, and I told him I was. He was a classmate of mine from elementary school who was visiting Hawaii with his children and grandchildren. We talked about our families, and when he asked me about Dad, I told him the news. He was quiet and then told me, "You know what I remember about your dad?" I said, "No, what?" And he said, "I still remember him bringing out that big black bag and that huge syringe." My classmate had remembered after all these years. He later shared with me that he had shared this experience with his own child, who after hearing the story became a veterinarian in their own home state in the mainland. That was Dad. Dad was also active as a scoutmaster while I was a Boy Scout, and these were some of the years that I really got to spend quality time with him away from the rest of the family, especially weekends camping. He helped me and many of my fellow scouts obtain their animal husbandry merit badge, and I can remember also being part of a crew of scouts who earned their masonry merit badge when we built the garage wall at our Salt Lake home. He was very supportive and calm, even when I jackhammered the garage floor by mistake. I remember him saying, "Just put some cement over there, no one will notice a difference." That was Dad. The best times were camping on the weekends, of which he gave me my first buck tent that he claims he used when he was a boy. I can remember when I was trying to earn my campfire merit badge, which was starting a fire without matches, getting too involved with my campfire to notice that I had built it in my buck tent. I remember someone yelling, "Fire!" and then getting doused with a pot full of water. I was afraid of what was to come next, like being grounded or not being able to go camping anymore. Calmly, all Dad said was, "Did you use matches?" I said, "No," which was the truth. He just said, "Good job, you just earned your merit badge." And the next time, don't make a fire in the tent. And in the same breath, he said, "Next week, we gotta buy you another tent. Yours has a huge hole in the top of it." That was Dad. Learning how to drive was another experience. My parents had informed all of us kids that we would not be able to use their cars even after we had obtained our driver's license, unless we drove another additional 1,000 miles with either of them in the car. Well, you can imagine how bummed out I was. But I proceeded to try and drove many weekends to our beach house at the time at Laie, which gave me a round trip of 90 miles. My mom wouldn't sit in the front with me. Dad was the designated instructor. I can remember how much more I learned and how much more confidence I gained in those 1,000 miles over the next few months. I had a tendency to come close to the right side of the road and speed up before I took a turn in the road. Dad would calmly put his hand on the wheel and quietly say, "Turn your wheel some more to the left, you're coming close to the curb, and prepare to slow down a little." He never yelled or freaked out. That was Dad. Dad, when faced with difficulty, always had a philosophical point of view. We had our beach house at Laie. We would go torching at night when the tide was low to catch saltwater fish for my fish tanks at home. I think Dad knew this was illegal, as our scoop nets that we were using were not legal in size. But he never told us, "No, we're not going torching because it's illegal." He knew how much fun all of us kids had when we were out together fishing. Later, I learned what we were doing was illegal, and I asked him, "Hey Dad, what if we get caught?" He replied, "What are they going to do? Throw us all in prison on a Saturday night? They just throw all the fish back in the water and then catch them again next week." That was Dad. Tennis was a big part of our lives growing up. Growing up a tennis family on both sides of the family, we kids all embrace the game, and to this day, most of us still play. I love the game so much, I also teach it part-time. My fondest memories were the weekends at Katy Lagoon, playing singles with Dad until the sun went down. He would always beat me, and even though I improved, I never could beat him. I don't remember how old I was, but it was when we played a set of singles at our last beach house at Turtle Bay that I finally beat him. I remember playing a close set and beating him 7-5. We talked about it until dinner, and some more until it was time for bed. It was a special day for me. We never played another set of singles after this. Till this day, I don't really know if I really beat him or if he let me win. But the feeling was priceless. I think he knew how I felt, and he would tell everyone how I finally beat him. That was Dad. Bowling league teammate of mine, who was a client of Dad's, often told me how much I was like Dad. This was an ultimate compliment for me, although I didn't realize it at the time. In emailing each other recently, now that my friend is living on the Big Island, he emailed me with his condolences and again reminded me about how much I reminded him of Dad. It was his statement, as well as others, that have reminded me about how much Dad has shaped, guided, supported, sacrificed, and loved me into the person I think I am today. So Dad, I would like to take this time again to thank you for all that you've done for me and continue to do for me. You are in my thoughts, in my heart, and part of me in everything I do. Rest in peace.
Thank you, David. Douglas?
I see we have a lot of veterinarians in the house and from the different clinics, hospitals around the island. Pleased to see that. I'd like to read something or what some fellow veterinarians have to say about Dad, which they posted on Dad's online memorial guest book. Dr. Ben Okimoto from Kansas State University, class of 80. As a veterinarian of 32 years experience, 24 of which have been at the Honolulu Zoo veterinarian, I still consider Dr. Choy as one of my earliest mentors, both personally and professionally. His cheery, friendly, and open demeanor was not just his bedside manner, but his actual personality. I can still recall many night experiences during the time that I spent as a live-in night attendant at the Kabalama Pet Hospital, and I'm still grateful to him for giving me my first job after graduation from veterinary school. A couple of Dad's OVC, Ontario College classmates wrote into. Ron Darling, class of 1960. Kwai and I were classmates in the Ontario Veterinary College class of 1960. Because Choy begins with C and Darling begins with D, we were lab partners in most of the labs, so I knew Kwai quite well. It was a long time ago, but I remember him being very proud of his military service. He was a little older than the average student, I think, and therefore a little more mature. He also prided himself on being a good student, and he was. Not easy for a guy who had been out of school for a while. James Brown, OBC, class of 60. Kwai Fong was my lab partner in our first year at Ontario Vet College. The course was histology, and I found it very difficult. I had little or no experience with microscopes, dissections, and biology, but Kwai Fong sure did, and he taught me more than the professor. I was to be indebted to him forever in getting me through the first year of college. He spent extra hours with me under the mics, never grumbled about anything, always smiling, and had a positive approach to everything in life. He had a serious side too, about education. He was very keen, also a competitor, such as in table tennis we played on occasion. Kwai Fong was a good guy, older than a lot of us, and more stable, being married and living off campus, and I liked him a lot. I visited him and his lovely wife Connie and met some of his family in his wonderful home in Hawaii. He loved his family as much as they loved him. I speak of him often when it comes to telling stories about college life in the 50s. He'll be missed in his community and owners of his furry friends.